All cultures have established sets of beliefs about men and women, including the traits they should possess and the roles they should occupy. Broadly speaking, we can call these beliefs the culture's gender belief system, which encompasses many different beliefs and attitudes about gender. In this brief video, we'll begin to explore these beliefs and attitudes along with the stereotypes that extend from them. I'll note a couple of things here. First of all, we'll be focusing specifically on stereotypes about men and women, since that's been the focus of psychological literature, and most of the research that we'll discuss won't incorporate intersectionality. As we delve into the research, however, I encourage you to think about whether the results might be different for different gender, racial, ethnic, or other identities, or for people who have a particular combination or intersection of different identities. Do these findings and theories apply to everybody, or is there some dimension missing? Asking yourself questions like these is a great way to start thinking like a psychological scientist and diversity scholar. Okay, let's get started. So what goes into a person's gender belief system? Similar to like the cultural level, different individuals have different gender belief systems as well. So there are at least 5 different dimensions that researchers believe are important here. First, we have gender stereotypes, which are beliefs, positive or negative, about the characteristics or traits of different genders, the different characteristic or traits that different genders should have or do have. We'll come back to this in much more detail in just a moment. As a product of a person's gender stereotypes, we have attitudes about gender roles. People differ in their attitudes about gender roles, with some believing that gender matters very little in what people do, and others believing that different genders are sort of strongly suited for different roles. Believing that men should be the breadwinners because they're naturally competitive and women should be the homemakers because they're naturally nurturing is an example of gender role attitudes that stem from gender stereotypes. That is, your stereotype, for example, that women are nurturing, informs your gender role attitudes. So they should be in charge of child rearing or in charge of keeping the home. Next, we have beliefs about one's own gender roles. Based on your gender identity, what role do you believe you should play in society? Do you believe that your different skills, abilities, preferences, and so on are the result of your gender or not? Okay, so as a result, sort of a product of the previous 2, gender role attitudes and beliefs about your own gender roles, the 4th component of your gender belief system involves your perceptions of role violators. What do you think about and how do you feel about someone who doesn't fit the mold, someone who doesn't fit your gender role attitudes? How do you view a family where the woman is a breadwinner and the man is the homemaker? Would you treat them differently? These are issues that surround the perception that you have of role violators. And finally, we have beliefs about sexual orientation. For example, whether you think it's okay to have sexual preferences that differ from the norm or not. Okay, for the remainder of this video and for much of the next few videos, we'll focus on gender stereotypes, the first main component of a person's gender belief system. And this is my particular area of expertise, so that's one reason we're going to focus on it. If we were to summarize all of the social psychological literature, that has investigated gender stereotypes, we would broadly say that, stereotypically speaking, men act whereas women relate. And again, this is according to stereotypes, according to people's beliefs. So what do we mean by this? Men act and women relate, stereotypically. Act here refers to what psychological scientists call agentic traits, like being an agent, right? Traits such as independent, strong, and self-confident, but also including other dimensions like competence, industriousness, and as we've seen from some of my research, intelligence. In contrast, relate here refers to what psychologists call communal traits. For example, traits such as emotional, helpful, kind, and empathetic. People tend to associate agentic traits with men and communal traits with women, which map onto traditional gender role attitudes that I've described already. For example, men being the breadwinners because they're naturally agentic, according to the stereotype, and women being the homemakers because they're naturally communal, again, according to the stereotype. In 2001, Mary Kite sought to study and break down the content of these kinds of gender stereotypes, and you can see the results of her work here. The first big column, and I'll point it out, I suppose, right here, this column details beliefs about women, and then that second column next to it details beliefs about men. And these beliefs are broken down into 4 categories: traits, roles, physical characteristics, and cognitive abilities. You can see those here on the very left. In terms of traits, for example, people tend to believe that women are aware of others' feelings, they're helpful, they're gentle, kind, and warm, whereas men, again, according to people's beliefs, are active, competitive, independent, and self-confident. That certainly sounds a lot like what we've been talking about so far, right, with these communal versus agentic traits that we just described. And what about roles? For women, we have lots of things that involve homemaking, whereas for the men, we have lots of things that involve breadwinning, right? It all kind of connects. Again, these very traditional gender role attitudes stem from that same communal versus agentic gender stereotypes that we just described, those same acting versus relating. If you'd like, you can pause the video to explore the full list of gender stereotypes here, but I think you get the idea. Now, you might feel like a lot of this is oversimplified, and that's because it totally is. In the next few videos, we'll explore several caveats and we'll get much more detailed about gender stereotypes and sexism. We'll discuss the mismatch between people's attitudes toward women, which are generally very positive, and the widespread existence of sexism. And we'll explore several different forms of sexism, for example, old-fashioned versus modern sexism, and also something called ambivalent sexism. So stay tuned for that.